Hi, welcome to Austin Public Library's Rooftop Community Relationships Series. I'm excited to invite some partners that I've been involved with, mentors and colleagues. Ms. Sharon Stroy from Rutgers University and Terry Barksdale from Austin Community College. We're excited because we are all stakeholders in truth, racial healing, and transformation. And we intersect together because we have done community work together. And I will allow each woman to introduce themselves and we'll get further into the conversation. Ms. Sharon Stroy.
Thank you, Carmelita. How are you? I hope everyone is fine. As you stated, my name is Sharon Stroy. I am the Director of Public Engagement in the School of Public Affairs and Administration. I am also the Director for the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Center at Rutgers University Newark. I've been at Rutgers University Newark 20 years now. I am in my fourth position. As the Director of Public Engagement, I am responsible for building relationships and creating mutually beneficial partnerships and collaborations between our faculty, staff, students, alumni, and community partners. In 2017, Rutgers University Newark replied to the request for proposals to host a TRHT campus center. And we were one of the first 10, the first inaugural cohort to host a TRHT campus center, along with other institutions like Austin Community College, Brown, University of Maryland at Baltimore County, Duke, Spelman, and the Citadel. We officially launched the opening of our center in February, Black History Month of 2018. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Terry?
Thank you, Carmelita. And every time I get an update from Sharon on what she is doing at Rutgers University Newark, it is absolutely inspiring. Sharon and I go back a few years now, as do Carmelita and I. And that is thanks to this work. And it is through this work that our relationships have been fostered and allowed to grow. And I'm so grateful for the gifts of being involved with each of you women and in this work. My name is Terry Barksdale. I'm a librarian. While I used to serve in public libraries when I lived in South Carolina, I now serve at Austin Community College. I've been there for 12 years, and prior to that, I was with the University of Texas System, a unit called the UT Telecampus that served exclusively digital students. It was during that time that I served as a librarian for distance education students that I began to notice the great disparities amongst students who were coming through our programs. For some, navigating the digital systems were not a problem at all. And for others, it was a great challenge and they needed more support. We found ways to build tutorials that supported them right where they were so that all students could flourish in that online environment, which was growing quite a bit back in the early 2000s. So serving as a librarian, I know that information is important to all peoples, and I want to see an exchange of information of value. Since I've started studying TRHT, I've had a deeper appreciation of the wisdom of other cultures. I've had opportunities to learn about ways of being that are different from mine, but that I see enrich my experience and the experience of those from whose cultures those practices emanate are beautifully enriched. So this experience of being part of TRHT work is uplifting, fulfilling, and I just feel very blessed that I get to do it as a part of my work.
Thank you, Terry. I just want to move a little further into educating our community and people with the Truth Racial Healing Transformation paradigm. Some people, think it's a long name, but we know that it's a process, right? Sharing stories is the way that we humanize this work of equity, diversity, and inclusion. We also understand that, Sharon, you have mentored me into this work because I am beginning my work with Austin Public Library, but also using the Truth Racial Healing Transformation Circle. We have introduced that to our branches as an option to connect to our communities. We feel that it's a wonderful way to connect. I've also began to train library staff to become facilitators, and they have gone through the training with Austin Community College's Truth Racial Healing Transformation Center. And so we are beginning to lay the groundwork and the platform. But of course, there's always consideration about other areas of inequities, not just racial. But we know that where there are disparities and marginalization, that it all comes down and stems down to the construct that America started with institutional and systemic racism. So I'd like you to speak a little more on your work with the Newark libraries, as well as your perspective on the journey that we use with our institutions to our libraries and the connection.
So thank you. One of the things when we submitted our proposal in 2017, we are fortunate at Rutgers University Newark to have leadership that believes in collaboration, cross collaboration with the community, with the city of Newark. Our slogan is, we're not just in Newark, we're of Newark. So we have leadership that fosters collaboration with the city. So part of our grant proposal was to include community partners. The Newark Public Library and our other community partner was the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, a think tank and research organization that really is moving the conversation around legislative policies in New Jersey. So the work is being led by Ryan Haygood, the CEO and president. So an amazing strategic partner. In the city of Newark is a 350-year-old city. We were dealing with some real perceptions and narrative, extremely negative narrative about the city of Newark. As someone who was born and raised, I have a fondness for the city and the people, the culture, the activism that comes out of the city. However, people will say outside, and sometimes even inside, you work in Newark or you live in Newark, as if it is a negative connotation. But that goes back to what the media and those stories that are portrayed in the media. If you're not portraying positive stories, then people's perceptions of that city will always be what it is. There is still the perception that Rutgers is the ivory tower. So when we decided to include the Newark Public Library, there are 7 branches in the city. We decided to physically place the location of the TRHT centers in each of the branch libraries to engage our community, to engage the residents. Their branch locations are located in what we call wards. It's the East Ward, the South Ward, the West Ward, and each ward has a different demographic. So the librarians, the branch managers, have to provide programming based on their neighbors, based on their community. So it became really important for us to go into the communities, into the wards, and talk to the people. We just decided we're not going to provide programming until we have an assessment as to what the people need and what they are looking for. And the branch managers were our best partners in this work. So I would attend the monthly branch managers meeting. All of the branch managers participated in the racial healing circle, a tool. It is one tool in the TRHT framework that we use to share stories in a safe, brave, responsible space, to understand that we actually have more in common than we do different. And it's human stories, not race, not gender, but stories about our human experiences. And so being able to, share that with them, train them to be facilitators to where they serve their community. And so it was an intentional, strategic process for us to make sure that the Newark Public Library was a part of our grant. It is still a part of our work. The work has changed because of COVID, but they are a strategic partner along with the library system within Rutgers University.
Thank you so much. And Terry, I want you to talk to us about, you and I have served on the steering committee for Austin Community College and really helped to kind of birth some of the Truth Racial Healing Transformation Center, foundation. We were been a part of that evolution. But I'd like you to share with the community, some of the work that you have done and some of the community connections that you've been a part of and how critical it has been with the library.
Every bit of the work that I've done related to the TRHT effort seems, as I look back on it, to truly be divinely guided for my personal growth, to move in a place of consciousness so that as I did this work, as I engaged with other people, I could be in a place where I could learn and grow, but also hopefully support others in learning and growing, and seeing one way of being a white woman, an older white woman. So it has been an incredibly rich experience for me throughout, even before I knew that I was doing this work. When I came to Austin Community College, I became very interested in the student success leadership work that Dr. Stephanie Hawley was leading. It was revolutionary to me to think of disaggregated data, and yet it was so clear once we looked that so much of our work was yet to be done. We were not in a place of celebrating outcomes. We should not be celebrating the outcomes that we were seeing in our disaggregated data, where Brown and Black students were disproportionately not being supported by the institution in their college success. So that being the original impetus, I must say that I came into the work rather as an academician and, had my data hat on. And this whole idea of being reflective and thinking about my biases, that took me a hot minute to get comfortable with. But as I progressed with the work and as I sat with men and women who are of the global majority, and they gently allowed me to see evidence of the truth through history, through narrative stories, through experiences like the color line, or, all these beautiful experiences that are designed to help people visualize the practical inequities that many people in our population face every day. Those experiences cumulatively helped me move to a place of thinking to myself, as the mother of a then 9-year-old, how can I not be engaged in this work? How can I leave this world as it is just because that's how I inherited it? No, it's my responsibility to participate. And through that realization that I wanted to do this work so that the world could be perhaps only a little bit better by the time my daughter's generation comes. Now she's 17. Mama's having a fit that she's about to go off to college next year. So at each stage of our lives, we evolve. And my self-reflective growth over the last 12 to 15 years has been, realizing how much I missed in richness and experience, in insight and wisdom, because the way I was brought up in South Carolina was a way that held fast to the concept of separation, something that I've learned about now as a framework that has supported racism in our country. This idea of separation in housing, for many years, separation in schooling. So for me, the TRHT has been a very personal journey. And I've had to work hard to immerse myself in memories that are sometimes very uncomfortable and painful to consider. And yet, I remember how painful and uncomfortable they were for the generations before me who chose to ignore it and had to live with ignoring it for their entire lives.
Thank you, Terry. We are, of course, this is a wonderful conversation, and I just would like us to go a little deeper, but also getting ready to conclude. As I stated, and I'm thanking you, Terry, for naming Dr. Christopher, which I call the architect of this work, and naming Dr. Stephanie Holly, who brought that model to Central Texas. Because we stand on the shoulders of folks who we need to pay homage to, because a lot of people nationally and globally will not take that time. And that's why we're on this screen. And I'm just wanting to us to conclude on the heels of Dr. King's birthday and on the heels of the 6th National Day of Racial Healing. What are some thoughts that you would like to leave our community with?
So for me, and listening to Terry, just being reflective about the space that I've been in and places that I've been fortunate and dare say privileged as some spaces to be in. When I think about Dr. King and the National Day of Racial Healing, I really, I think about how much more work is needed. Our theme yesterday at Rutgers University, Newark, was healing in action, impact, and integration. How do we measure healing? How do we include healing in all of the work that we have to do for diversity, equity, inclusion, justice? Healing has to be a part of it, and not healing just for Black and Brown communities, but healing for all communities. The history of this country and the construct. It is a construct of white supremacy. Racism is a construct of power that this country has been founded on. It is in the DNA of the soil. And the history, the true history of this country has not been talked about. But we have to get to a place as people to talk about the truth. Hence the reason it is called Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. I don't need you as an African-American woman, a mother of 2 sons and a daughter, and a grandmother born in the midst of COVID. You may not be able to fix it, but I need you to acknowledge the truth. This is what has happened. This is what is going on. And if we as the human race don't all come together to have those difficult conversations about the long-term residual impacts of chattel slavery, of Jim Crow, of concentration camps for our Japanese brothers and sisters, we all have to be able to talk about that. When we talk about the truth, that is where the racial healing starts occurring. Now we're able to have conversations about critical race theory from an intelligible perspective. We're not talking about what we need to teach our children. We need to teach our children history, but everybody's history, not one from one lens. But in order to do that, we need to have people from all backgrounds, all ethnicities, races, genders, political ideology, religious thought, and that becomes our history. When we're able to sit down as human beings, the racial healing occurs. You don't see the packaging of an African-American woman, you see a human being. You see a wife, a mother, a grandmother. And now my sister Terry and I can have an honest conversation about truth, which is the racial healing part. Now, what does the policies look like? How is this impacting Black and brown communities? How do we change some of the laws, the rules, the policies? That is where the transformation occurs. The goal of each TRHT Campus Center is to create the next generation of leaders to dismantle institutional and structural racism. But if we don't check our biases at the door and dismantle our negative belief systems, then none of these things are going to change. And one place that is so important to do it is in the public libraries, college libraries, the place that we share information, making sure the books are representative of all people, the research, the reference materials that were used. The public library, the library system is the core of sharing knowledge and information. But if that is not inclusive of everyone's history, then that information that we're sharing is limited. And it continues to perpetuate an already broken system.
Thank you, Sharon. Terry, you and I were part of the launch and partnership for Austin Community College and Austin Public Libraries to start celebrating the National Day of Racial Healing, hosting the First Truth Racial Healing Transformation Circle yesterday virtually. I'd like you to just speak about this partnerships that we have begun and the part that you feel that you're playing in your libraries, and just a word you'd like to leave our community.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment on something that was such an amazing and uplifting experience for me. Because what I find is, for me, every racial healing circle experience that I've been through has taught me something about myself and allowed me to reflect on perhaps a difficult or perhaps a joyous experience from my past in a different way. So I guess it's been four years, I think, since the first time that I was invited to cut my teeth by co-facilitating a racial healing circle. What a journey it has been. Every single experience in those 4 years has, Carmelita, to borrow some of your language, if I may, woven a beautifully woven tapestry of our shared humanity, each one unique, each one rich and beautiful. but being in a place where, because of the touchstones that we share in the circle, of knowing that everyone's intention is to not judge my story and to just receive it for what it is and perhaps get curious about my story or what led me to feel the way that I felt. So when I come to the circle, when I see others come to the circle for the first time or for the 10th time, the magic that happens is the same. It's connection. It's identifying shared humanity. It's overcoming our fear of vulnerability. Oh, Lord, I'm a 60-year-old white woman. I am sure to put my foot in my mouth before this circle is over with. Well, if I'm in a space where people have committed to not judge me, then perhaps I'll be in each circle, I'll be a little bit quicker to realize when I've made an assumption that was unfair. And I can learn that I'm given the space to correct myself. And it is okay for me to say, you know what, that came out wrong. Let me try that again. And that's okay. It's not perfect, but it's better than I would have done 10 years ago. And that's what these circle processes help me to realize is I'm moving along a continuum of racial consciousness. Because of where I began way down on the tail end of that thing, and I had some work to do.
I would like to add one last thing. I know we're wrapping up, but I want to explain to the audience the importance of the diversity in the co-facilitators. There is intentionality in the design process of a racial healing circle. Yes, the participants are all supposed to be diverse, so everybody can learn from their experiences. But it's also important for the co-facilitators to be just as diverse as well. And so I have been fortunate to work with Terry in facilitating workshops for faculty members, for staff members, for participants in the TRHT network. And as we are preparing to facilitate the workshops, Terry and I found out that we actually had a lot more in common as children growing up I was in New Jersey, Terry grew up in South Carolina. But had we not sat down to properly prepare as co-facilitators in an authentic space, we would never have uncovered how much we had in common growing up in two different regions, two different time periods, definitely two different schools, but we had more in common as children, even more so than we do as adults. And so that makes the experience for the participants a lot more authentic. You have a greater impact with the participants, and they can see the same conversation, the same narrative coming out of two obviously very different people. But we're now speaking the same language. So as the librarians in the Austin Public Library and for Austin Community College, as you move forward with designing and developing racial healing circles, be mindful, stay true to the process. And yes, Gail Christopher, the architect, and all of the people that they used to put it together, you may call it a racial healing circle, a learning circle, a healing circle. But if you stay true to the TRHT framework and that design process, transformation is around the corner.
And with that, I will say thank you. Thank you, Sharon Stroy. Thank you, Terry Barksdale. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Austin Public Library, Austin Community College, Rutgers University. It's been my honor and pleasure. I thank y'all. Thank you very much. Thank you.